All right, so today we're going to be talking about multi-band compressors. Wow, I messed that up. We're going to be talking about multi-band compressors and multi-band compression. I'm going to go over how to use the tool and a couple different examples of how to utilize it in a mix. I'm going to be using a melody and a vocal to just explain what a multi-band compressor does. And then in a future video, if you guys want me to, I'll actually use it in a full mix to really show you, something that I would use it for. But for now, it's really just going to be two examples to show you how to actually use a multi-band compressor so you can apply it to your mix. Let's go. All right, so if we're going to be talking about multi-band compression, we got to explain all of the parameters, which we're going to do in this video. So you'll see there's a bunch of different types of multi-band compressors. I'm using C4 by Waves for this tutorial to kind of explain it because it's one that I use a lot, very common one. You'll see a lot of people use it. Great multi-band compressor. So it looks a little bit intimidating when you first look at one. So this video is kind of going to be a start of a guide. It'll be a little bit of like basics as if you're just looking at a multi-band compressor, but also good for people who have used one before. But I want to make sure to explain everything on the multi-band just in case. But if you already know, skip forward. So first thing I'm going to do is go over here, and on here I'm going to change this to manual. And what you'll see when you first look at a multi-band compressor is a lot of maybe confusion when you first see it, but it's real simple to see. So we have one segment right here if we just look at it, right? And I'm going to explain this one segment because this one segment is the same here, here, and here. And then up here, you'll see this is frequency ranges. So with a multi-band compressor, what it's allowing you to do, instead of just using one compressor, right, that compresses the entire signal no matter what you could do with multi-band compression or a multi-band compressor is compress certain frequencies or certain parts of a source, right? So let's say we just wanted to compress the low end of something. We didn't want to affect the mid-range or the high end. And you'll be like, oh, well, what would that be used for? Well, let's say we had a vocal, right? And the vocal had, we'll say mid-range. So we'll say the vocal had some mid-range muddiness between 100 hertz, 400 to 500 hertz, right? And in that range, it wasn't always present. We just had certain words or phrases where there was more of that buildup. Well, you can get a multi-band compressor and you can find that frequency range, and then you can tell it to compress that when those words come up. So when you get a lot of that boxiness in certain words, but it's not there in others, when it crosses the threshold, it'll activate the compression and take it out. Just an example of like what you're going to use it for. So let's explain what each part means. So I'm going to explain it on the C4. For other multi-band compressors, it's going to be similar, but it might be a bit different. For example, this range knob also includes the ratio, and on some you might actually see the ratio. So we're going to explain right over here. So we could hit solo, right? And that's going to control this band right here. So if I hit solo, you'll see that I can control where I want the band. This is going to be the solo button if you just want to hear a source by itself. So let me go ahead and get a loop over here from the new Waves Loop Kit. Shout out to Waves Loop Kit. Go check it out. There's a link in the description. Let's choose one from over here. All right, so let's see this one. This one has some low end in it. Let's say we didn't really like that too much or something. So if we hit solo, what's going to happen is going to solo whatever band we're on. Right? Solo this one. And we're only going to hear what we solo. Bypass is going to bypass the band. So obviously now there's no compression happening. Let me go ahead and turn this up so it matches. So these are obviously going to be the easiest settings, right? You have solo and bypass if you don't want to use the band. And then over here, we're going to go to gain, which is just going to be the makeup gain. So if we did like 2 dB of gain reduction and we wanted to bring the overall back up, we have this. We can raise this gain, and it's a makeup gain that you'll see on a lot of compressors. And then we have range. So what this is going to do is whatever we set this to, negative or positive, we're talking about downwards compression with this video. If we got into upwards compression, that's a whole nother tutorial with multi-bands. So the range sets the maximum gain change for each band. So pretty much what that means is the further that we pull this down, the higher we're allowing the maximum gain to be changed when we actually pull that threshold down and start to get gain reduction happening. And the ratio is also included in this. So the further we pull this down, the higher the ratio. So it's kind of like both brought in together as one where you usually be used to seeing a ratio. So let's say we had the range to like -4, -5. Once we start to pull down our threshold, that's about the amount, the maximum amount that we're going to let this get pulled down when we're actually doing compression. And then we have the basic attack and release. And if you guys haven't seen, I'll have a little card up top, I think at the right, of me explaining a compressor so you can see what attack and release do on a compressor. But pretty much when the signal goes over our threshold, at what point do we want it to be attacked, and at what point do we want the compressor to release it? So now that you know what this does, and then we have the threshold, right? So depending on the signal coming in, if this is at 0, nothing's going to come through. Let's go ahead and press play. And I need to get my threshold down to at least here to start affecting any of this signal. So let's start bringing it down. You'll start to see some movement happening. And then we can adjust the attack and release depending on the source. So you'll see that that's going to be the same for all of these bands over here. It's the same type of settings. So now all you really need to do is focus on where you want your crossovers and what you want to compress. So what I like to do is actually just take these thresholds all the way up, so I'm not necessarily getting any gain reduction happening while I'm not paying attention, because when you first load this up, watch what happens. It's already changing the tone, right? A lot's going on, as you can see, but you can just bypass these if you don't want to use them or you're worried about them ending up doing compression. So from here, let's say we had like a mid-range problem, right? And we heard something going on in this loop that we didn't necessarily like. I'm going to use this as an example, but you could have a vocal, you could be using it on the master bus. If someone sent you a 2-track to mix and you don't want to necessarily put a hole in the mix, and just take out a lot of mid-range, because only on like certain parts that happens, you can reach for a multiband to kind of compress that and get those out of the way when it does happen. So let's press play. Right, so let's say for this that we hear some bass in there that we don't necessarily like. It's not terrible, but we want to just kind of control it a little bit more. But we don't want to just EQ it out, because it'll take it out of the whole sample. Maybe there's just a few notes like here that we like, but then over here, somewhere in here, we want to control it because it's a little bit too much low end. So what we can actually do is come over here. We could take one of these bands, right? And we'll say everything from 174 hertz down, we want to compress. So this will be what it's sounding like. That's what we want to affect, right? So what we'll start to do is just press play. Start to bring our threshold down. We'll bypass these for now. And we'll do a smaller range, maybe just like 3 dB, negative 3 dB. Let's go to a bit of a faster attack to catch it quick. And a fast release as well. Don't want to hold it too long. And then let's pull our threshold down a little bit more. We'll pull the range down a little bit more so you can hear it. So let's go ahead and listen to it now. Let's listen to it right here. So let me go ahead, have it off. Let me loop this section real quick. So first with it off. And let's say we wanted it more drastic. So we came over here and did a range of like 7, pulled this down, so -7. So it's going to be at a maximum of -7 that's going to be happening when we're taking out the frequency. So let's see. So you see how that removed a lot of the bass, right? And that's what we're trying to do specifically on those notes. But other parts of the sample where there might not be that much bass or that many notes being played, since it's changing, this actually won't take much of that out. And we can really get in here and adjust how much we want it to be done. So I'm going to give a few more examples. So let's go ahead and bypass that. Let's say we like the low end, but we heard some mid-range. And like I said, I'm just using this as an example. There's not too many times when I'm reaching for a multiband when on my own like melodies and loops, because I could adjust that in the mix or, while arranging and stuff. But let's just say, for example, this is just something I'm using to kind of show you how to use the tool. But you had a vocal or something, or you were mixing a 2-track for somebody and certain parts, like I said, had buildup, other parts didn't in the mid-range, and you wanted to fix those with the multiband. You can come over here and compress different parts to kind of control it more. Let's go ahead and let's say we just wanted to solo here to find the range that had buildup. So let's just say I had muddiness around 2 to 400. maybe 500, right? And let's say in here, we started finding that we didn't like this too much. So what I'll do is go ahead and just take out a little bit and compress a little bit in this frequency range instead of compressing the whole track. Maybe I hear stuff jumping out in here, right? There's like some keys or something with the guitar, something that kind of pops out in the mid range, and I want to control it, right? I don't want to EQ it out because I like it, but I don't want to compress the whole source either. I just want to compress that frequency that's kind of jumping out there. I can go ahead and do that with a multiband. So let's go ahead, press play, pull our threshold down, and adjust the attack and release and see what we could do. Right, so it's a little bit cleaner now. Let me go ahead and over exaggerate this a lot and show you what you could do with this. We can actually just make this sound pretty like thin if we were gonna, just completely compress the mid range. Right, it sounds really weird because obviously it's an extremely high ratio and a very high range that we're allowing to be taken out. So I like to be a little bit more subtle on it depending on the source. So now let's say that we had some mid-range that we took out, and then let's go over here and bring this one back in, right? We did some low end. Let me go ahead and press play. Get this moving again. So we can actually raise output gain here if we needed it to be louder, right? Because we took some out and we just felt like, okay, now it's being compressed. We want to add some back in. Or you can come over here to this output and bring up the master output as well. If you feel like the source after being compressed is quieter and you want to gain stage it and gain match it before and after, you can use the output tool right there. But I'm going to go ahead real quick and bring in a vocal next and show you what we could do with that as well. All right, so I just made a real quick chord progression as 2 chords, and then I brought in an arcade vocal. And for the vocal, there's a little bit of mid-range that I want to control. And then for the high end, I want to compress it because it has some parts that kind of stick out, and I don't necessarily just want to EQ it all out. So this is going to be a perfect example of when we use multiband compression. So I'm going to let you hear it real quick. Like, it's super simple. It's nothing crazy, but just something that we can learn from while watching and hearing. So let me go ahead and press play, and the compressor is on, but I have the thresholds brought all the way up, and you'll see that it's not affecting the sound source right now. So what I want to control is parts of this mid-range, and then for that high end, I really want to get it under control and kind of compress it a little bit. So I don't necessarily want to compress the whole vocal in this instance, and I don't want to EQ it out. So like I said, this is a perfect example of when we can use something like C4 or multiband compressor to get some compression going in certain areas of this actual vocal or in areas of the mix. So I have it enabled. What I'm going to do is start to find that part I don't like. So you can hear it, I'm going to solo it, and I'm going to use these 2 bands right here to figure out where I want my crossovers to be. And I'll drag them out really far so you can hear what's going on. So it's kind of that muddy range right in there. So let's unsolo it. And we'll do maybe -6 for our range and start to bring down our threshold. Now we got some compression going. You could bypass these. Forgot to set that to manual. There we go. And faster attack. And I'm just setting my release as far as I hear the words. You can kind of see a visual here of when it's releasing. If we have a faster release, it's going to let up really quick, right? Let's see. And I kind of want it to hold a little bit longer. So let's go somewhere over here. And let's go maybe here. Turn it on and off. Is off. On. So now the next thing I want to do with this vocal is get some of the high end under control. So I'm going to go ahead and solo it so you can hear it. And we're going to start to find that range where we hear a lot of that I want to affect. So it's in solo right now. So you just hear the high end of this crossover. Okay, so around there is probably about where I want to affect it. Get it more in control. And let's go make -7 for the range. Faster attack. Want to hold out that release. And let's bring down the threshold. Now we have some compression happening. That's over exaggerated so you can really hear it. That's too much, right? But if we wanted to, we could. So let's see. Now I feel like it's a little bit more controlled on the high end because I am compressing it. So it's a little bit more under control. And we'll do a before and after. So this was an extreme example of it, right? You can see that we did lose some high end, but I did tell you that I wanted to control a lot of that high end more. And I knew that a little bit of it was going to come out because I necessarily didn't want it there, but now it fits a little bit better. But I just wanted to show you different ways that you can utilize it in an easy way that you can hear. And by creating like a simple chord progression, just having a vocal on it. And let's say that I wanted some of that high end more controlled. It's easy to hear and see when it's like, you know, something very simple. So you can kind of get an idea for what this tool can be used for and use it in your mixes when you need it. Literally, the way I think of mixing is once you learn how to use the tool and what it could be utilized for, when you run into a problem in a mix and you're like, okay, I need to fix that, you know what tools you can reach for to fix it, right? So if you know how to use it and you have an issue, like, oh, I just need to use this plugin to fix it. I need to use this piece of hardware if you use hardware to fix that issue, right? So the more you can learn the plugins and how they work, the more you'll be able to really just hear something in a mix and know what you need to reach for. And that's just the way that I like to think of mixing. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did like this video, leave a thumbs up. You guys can follow me on all social medias at Lifestyle Did It. Make sure to hit my site, lifestyledidit.com, for everything else. Other than that, subscribe to your boy. Push notifications. Thanks.